Do more, be better. The podcast where we explore the intersection of business, technology, and personal growth and how they shape our lives, families, and careers. Every week, we dive into the stories of entrepreneurs and innovators who are redefining what it means to achieve professional success while maintaining personal fulfillment. Welcome. Let's get into it. Welcome, Hannah. Looking forward to a fun, free-flowing conversation today on Do More, Be Better. I like to start by asking my guests with some intro questions to let the audience ease into getting to know you a little bit. You ready?
Sounds good.
Tell me and your guess, if we were going to ask your partner, your closest friends, your family to describe your outlook on life in one sentence, what would they say?
Incredibly optimistic.
That's a good way to go about life. Tell us what drives you each and every day to do more and be better.
I think my answer to that has pretty recently changed. I think before, what I would consider maybe like my origin story or growing up or the chance to do better for my family was probably it. But I think recently that's changed to more of a desire to be curious and explore and operate from a different place of curiosity versus maybe expectation or hope for setting a new standard.
Why do you think that has happened?
A lot of therapy, probably. And I think I've just learned to calm down. I think for a long time I've operated in this do more, be better from maybe a survival standpoint or really taking the concept of hustle as, I don't know, it just came from an interesting place. And I think throughout my career, that's just been something I constantly look at. I'm operating from a drive that feels a little bit more like survival? Am I operating from a place because it feels fun and exciting and curious? And it's a question I ask myself often.
It's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of friends, people who are career-oriented, want to have that drive to be ambitious and try new things. And this concept of reactionary thinking and strategic thinking. And it sounds a little bit like what you're talking about, right? Coming from a place of survival is very reactionary, fight or flight, right? Versus being able to take a step back and make decisions holistically about where you want to go. What do you think about your upbringing or your first years of professional life have helped you move away from the survivorship to a more strategic place?
I think a lot of my upbringing started the survival one. So I grew up in a small South Texas type of town. It wasn't until college that I realized what I grew up in actually fit like a poverty standard. That was interesting. And then through a mixture of just life, right? My mom passed away at a young age. My dad had to react to that type of situation. And it was somewhere around teenage years that I think the concept of growing up quickly just hit me. And from then on, I knew that I wanted to get out of my hometown. I graduated as the valedictorian of my high school. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And it was just all of this, like, let's get out of here mentality that I think drove a lot. That was a lot of my motivation. It felt maybe a little intrinsic at the time, but very much situational. And I don't think it really was until, honestly, maybe shortly after the pandemic, like 2020, 2021, that I think I was just able to switch that off and realize, okay, like you're okay. You got out of that hometown. You have your own business now. Life feels comfortable, and just really settling into that comfort, I think, is what helped me make the switch and start looking at life and people and connections and opportunities as something I could say yes or no to versus just saying yes to try to make things better.
What's an opportunity that you recently, in the last year or two, said no to that you think you would have otherwise previously said yes to out of survival versus strategic decisions?
Yeah. It was in 2022 that, or is it 2023? No, 2022, that I really felt like I had an opportunity to either continue growing the agency that I had started. I had a couple of team members at the time, and I knew that it was just this moment of like, am I going to continue doing this, or is it time to do something else? And I think that really was the decision point. I think the idea of stopping a well-functioning business that had a lot of clients and a good pipeline felt like it felt like a luxury to have that opportunity. And it was just one that I decided to take. I knew that at the time, I mean, I loved what I did. I loved the clients that I had. I loved the team that I had built. But there was just something inside of me that was curious to know what else was out there. And I would say that was it. That felt like a strategic decision of, we can let go of this. We can acknowledge that if we built it, in theory, I think I could do it again. And it's just really not having this like house of cards type of mentality, and just feeling like I can be strategic and think, what do I really want to like welcome into my life versus what am I trying to sustain?
That is a really powerful example, right? It's one of, I kind of view it as privilege to some extent, right? I also came from a very amazing, smart, educated family, but due to various circumstances, not a ton of money, right? And so that gives you a little bit of perspective, a little bit of that survival, the hustle, right? Get by, work throughout high school and then college and, all those things that, if you have that benefit, it is a privilege. Everybody has different privileges in life, right? And I think it is an interesting concept to reach a point where you start realizing, hey, I have some of that privilege. I can make some choices that otherwise maybe I wouldn't be able to before. Do you think that privilege that you now have, that you've recognized, changes how you interact with the world, positively, negatively?
I think it lets me go through life more slowly. And I think that feels really good. And it's so interesting because I think how you go through life at different stages in life can really serve you. And I think my constant yes and constant let's just go and let's go fast served me for a really long time. And I think it's helpful knowing that that is still a part of me and that is something I can tap into when I need to. But I think that's really changed is being able to move slowly and really enjoy the moment of what's going on versus what's next. And I think it's tricky, even when you mention the concept of like privilege. I think it's so interesting because growing up, there's this thought about you should be grateful for what you have, right? It's just this like deep gratitude, which I love, but I think there's like some fear behind it as well. And so I think a lot of it is just kind of untangling, I don't know, I guess like how our brains are kind of hardwired a bit. But so that's the thing that I've really been enjoying lately is this idea of slowness, this idea of I can observe and not react if I want to. And that feels really good.
Finding the ability to slow down in the moment or in the abstract, in the macro, is so powerful. I didn't find it until way later in my life. And, through my partner and through friends and this idea of both in the sort of moment of like breath work and taking a moment to meditate and those kinds of things, but also in the macro of like, hey, do I need to react to this thing right now or can I take a step back, right? And, I've also tried to work on this idea of shutting up, which I'm not very good at, right? We're on a podcast. But I think that is also a really important thing for anybody that's career oriented, founders, entrepreneurs, to realize that there's this need to take a step back and let others have space to grow. And that means being quiet sometimes, right? But it also means being calm and, tactical about where you spend your time and why. I also talk a lot about focusing on the journey, not the outcome, right? Because a lot of founders especially focus on, I need to get this exit, I need to grow to this scale, I need to hit this ARR, I need to do this, right? And they get caught in these sort of benchmarks that they're trying to hit. And when they don't hit them, depression ensues, right? And it's just this vicious cycle. How do you think taking that moment of being able to be calm can help entrepreneurs and founders work through that journey and embrace that journey?
I think it influences a lot of things. I think the first is culture. If you have a team, I think being able to pause and not immediately transfer all of the thoughts and feelings and emotions that you have as a founder immediately to your team around you is probably beneficial, depending on the team that you have. I think it also allows you to make better decisions. And pausing doesn't even mean for like days or weeks, right? It's just not being so reactive and feeling like a decision must be made right at this second. And so I think there's that mixture of like it helps with your team. I think it helps with better decisions. I think it also just helps you enjoy it a little bit more. I think that as founders, we have a cool opportunity in our hands to build something that makes an impact, that is a place that our team wants to enjoy being at. And I don't know, it sounds so cliche to just be like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But I think people say it so much because it's true.
The journey is so important. If you focus on the journey, you can enjoy the ups and downs of that journey. If you focus only on the outcome, sometimes it's a good outcome, sometimes it's not such a good outcome, and you forget about all the steps that got you there. That also, I think, from my perspective, is really important for the next thing, right? I think it's pretty rare that people do just one thing in their entire life, right? And if you focus on the journey, you learn all kinds of ups and downs. It's the fast fail idea, if you want to talk about it that way, or whatever it might be, is you learn things that you can apply to the next thing, and you can improve and get better, and maybe for a better outcome or just for a better journey, a better experience. Talk to me a little bit about your journey to entrepreneurship and being a founder. Is that something that you got instilled in you when you were a kid, going through high school? Where did that come from?
It's funny because I feel like entrepreneurship is something that goes as far back as I can remember. Whenever I was a kid, I was obsessed with jewelry, and my mom and I would always go shopping at some shopping center in our town, and I wanted to wear all the things, buy all the things. And so I remember being a kid, my mom really fed my curiosity in a lot of things that I was interested in. And she purchased several like Swarovski beads. And that was like my first entrepreneurial venture. I would make jewelry on the weekends, walk into class on a Monday. Teachers would buy the jewelry off of my hands as I walked to class. And I just loved it. I loved the idea of making something and putting it out there and bringing like joy and delight to people as they got it. I don't know. It felt very fun. It felt very natural. And I think a lot of people, as I think about my hometown, a lot of people have their own entrepreneurial ventures as well. I think it's really common in the Hispanic community as well. From the school spirit shirts to, all of the different like mums for, graduation. I don't know. I just think there's something instilled in our community about like creation and creativity. And I think that feels really fun. So that just comes from as long as I can remember it. But I do remember the day that I watched the movie The Devil Wears Prada, and that like changed everything for me. I don't know if you've seen that movie with Anne Hathaway and Meryl Streep. But it was, this girl who goes into the city and takes on the corporate world. And I thought, okay, this is what we're going to do. So that really sparked before I think life happened, that really sparked my curiosity to move out of the city or move out of our town and go and do something cool, whatever that meant. I had a very brief stint in corporate America that learned a lot from, but very quickly realized that wasn't for me, and then joined, the startup world after that. So that was really fun. I loved working at the startup here in Austin, Texas, and fast forward, the pandemic kind of took that away for a bit while the world was shut down, and that's really what kicked off my own real life founder journey when I started a marketing agency in the middle of the pandemic. And so that's like the short version of how we got from here to there.
There's a lot to unpack there. Did your bead business have a name, or was it just Hannah's Beads?
I don't think I had a name, but I remember I really cared about packaging. I remember going to Hobby Lobby and buying little boxes for everything to be in. I remember handwriting receipts on like pink paper with a pink sparkly pen. I don't know. I got the details early on, I would say.
That is
but no
really
skipped over that.
really impressive. You had packaging, you had receipts. Did you have like a CRM of like who you sold to? I mean, how old were you?
No CRM. HubSpot was
well,
them.
You fell down somewhere, but otherwise you seem to have done great for yourself. Who was it? Your mom that really was like, hey, you probably need good packaging, or you probably need receipts, or how did you decide to do some of the things that I think for a lot of founders don't come naturally?
I don't think so. I remember she asked me what she got, a Swarovski catalog. I remember picking everything like the colors that I wanted, and she was hands off in that perspective. Let me know, right, what we can do, and we'll go from there. And I think it was just watching others, right? So if we want to talk about competitive analysis at the age of 10, things come in boxes. You go buy boxes. I don't know where that came from. I can't tell you where that came in, but I think I just mimicked as closely what I saw in a store.
Brilliant. I love it. I love the pink receipts. It's like a last
Very
moment, right? Like, here's your receipt, but remember, it's Hannah's Beads that gave them to you. As you went through high school, did you do more entrepreneurial things? Did you focus on certain school activities or anything as you grew?
No, I did a little shift when I got into high school. My dad and my brothers worked in various construction, oil field type of industries. I was always good at math and science. So when I was in school, I was doing more of an architecture and engineering track. So I was part of the engineering club. I was a total science nerd. And that was actually what I got into college for. I was going to be a mechanical engineer. And then I think that was just one of those moments of realizing, no, I think I'm doing this for other people and not myself. So I swapped over to being a business major. So nothing really in high school, but when I was in college, I did start my own online clothing boutique. So I saved money, bought got a wholesale license, did a site, did a photo shoot, did all this cool stuff. So that was my, second. I say informal because those all felt like small projects to work on, but that's where I first figured out what an EIN was and how to do taxes, what licenses you needed. But even then, that was still very, I don't know, just figure it out. I liked to tinker with things, and I think if there's one common thread, I've just always had this belief that I can figure things out. So that has served me well, apparently.
Lots of founders have great ideas, right? I always chuckle with people who are like, I can't tell you my idea, but I have an idea. And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, well, if I tell you my idea, it'll get stolen. I'm like, that's not how this works, right? There are lots of ideas. It's really about the execution. And you can have a great idea, but you have to have execution behind it. And so I've always looked at and been drawn to people, I think like you, who are sort of builders at heart. they have an idea and then they go do something about it, right? And I don't mean execution isn't like, CRMs and project management software. I meant it like exactly what you said, right? You had an idea, you went and built the thing, you put it out into the world, and you saw what might happen. And I think that gives you a lot of sort of feedback on how to build a business and how you go about doing that. Do you think those experiences helped you when you decided to launch your first marketing agency?
For sure. I think when I first launched my agency, that felt okay. I felt in the real world at that point. I lost a very real full-time job. This was not just a side, clothing boutique to start online. This was a very real thing. And so I think so, but I think I would say so. And I think if anything, those experiences fostered that curiosity to just to figure out what would work and just this feeling of experimentation. If I think about the jewelry business, it's like, okay, I know that I pass all of these teachers when I'm walking down the hallway. Like, that could be a good moment to try something. I was in drill team, so there's all the moms there that I could do something with. When I did the online clothing boutique, I knew that I lived in a student apartment complex, so I could put flyers and know that a bunch of target audiences were right around me. And so I don't know. It's so funny. I've never really tried to connect the dots that way until now. But I think in those low pressure situations, it just reminded me to look around, just to look around and see what you can find that works.
I think it's so important. I think there's a couple things that go on with what I'll call the normal people that don't do the sort of chaos of starting businesses and founders and stuff. Is I hear a lot of this idea, which is if it was that easy, everybody would do it, right? And I like to tell people, no, that's not how it works, right? And it's the people that act that end up getting the benefits of that action, right? It's like the idea and execution as another version of it, right? I think another thing that's interesting that you just said is there's a lot of conversation about you have an idea, go execute on that idea, right? And then you go sell on that idea, and then you try to get customer feedback so you can iterate on your idea. But something that's not often talked about is distribution. And I think it's an interesting thing that you just said, because in each instance that you just described, you were focused on distribution, right? Like, hey, I have this idea, but
I was a marketing major before I realized.
Exactly. Like you were like, hey, look at that. There's moms I can sell to. Boom, right? I have a student housing of people that are just there. You can't leave, so here you go, right? Like, how do you think distribution can play a role in making decisions on what you launch and how you launch it?
Oh, I think it's everything. I feel like distribution is part of marketing, which I think is, maybe this is from a marketer's perspective, but I think it's the core of your business, which is who are you building? Who are you building it for? What do those people want? Where are they? What would delight them? I think it's all of the decisions. And I don't mean for that to be a short answer, but I think that is actually what I think about the power of marketing and understanding the basics of why do you exist and who are you building in mind for.
I came to marketing, advertising, this world of thinking about these kinds of things later in life because my partner, when I met her, was in advertising, right? And so you know how it is with you come home and through osmosis, you just hear stuff endlessly and you sort of gets built into your head. But I've always found it fascinating that smart business people, right, seem to think that marketing is ancillary, unnecessary oftentimes, right? And we are starting to move into a world where technology hasn't been able to solve getting people to buy things, and we're moving back towards the world of transformation and getting people to believe in something. What's your take on that right now?
I think it makes so much sense to me because even at the end of the day, if we go back to this 10-year-old jewelry company, there's a human, the founder, who has built something, the product, for someone. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're people creating things for other people. And I think this like return to brand reflects that. It's did that person who you're buying from make you laugh? Did they make you feel good? Were they consistently showing up for you? I think, I don't know, I tend to not try to dip into the world of like the humanity of marketing, but I think it's true. I think we're humans interacting with each other. And I think what we're seeing in the return to brand is telling brands and founders, like, learn how to be a human again.
David Ogilvy has this quote that I'm going to butcher right now, but it's essentially like, you're not, advertising to a standing army. You're advertising to a marching, like, brigade. And the idea behind it is that you have to get their attention, right? Like, you have to do more than just, hey, you're locked in that room. You have to buy something. Here's the thing, right? And I think that goes to some of what you're talking about, which is a return to humanity, a return to, hey, there are humans interacting with you. It's not just bots buying things. And to get their attention, you have to do more than, quote unquote, trick them. Stop.
I liked it. Give you a thumbs up.
Stupid. All right, I'm going to start over. God damn, stupid. I don't know why it turns back on. It shouldn't turn back on. I turned it off. Okay, anyway.
Mine is still off. Okay.
All right, ready? I'm going to butcher the quote, but David Ogilvy has this quote that you are advertising to not a standing army, but a marching army. The idea that you don't have dedicated people just sitting there paying attention to you, and you have to create attention, right? You have to bring awareness to a moving set of audiences. It's always a different person at a different time in a different situation. And I've always loved that idea, and I think that goes to a lot of what you discussed, which is this idea that we have to focus on humanity. We have to focus on the human, not the bots buying things. And is that why you decided to launch a new agency that is really focused on brand, on awareness?
For sure. I think if we were to even kind of go back to my first agency, a lot of it was focused around that still. I think I worked with a lot of like startup founders or small business owners who were passionate about what they're building. And I think that was always the message for us here. It's that you as an individual are unique. You have your own worldview and experiences that have led you to build this thing that you're building. Your brand can be a reflection of that or borrow some aspects of that, but at the end of the day, you're selling a product and human beings are buying it. So what is that experience that we're creating for people? I don't think that people have a problem spending money. And I think they're more likely to spend money if the process and the relationship that they have with the brand is fun and memorable and feeds into an identity that they have about themselves. And so those are like the very core concepts of marketing that I think founders and anyone really can just benefit from being reminded of. So when we think about, my old agency, as I mentioned, there was a moment there where I just had to think, do I want to continue with what we're doing, or can I pause? Can I take that, put that kind of survival mentality on pause and figure out, is there anything else out here that is worth exploring again? And at this time, we're starting to see things like AI and technology playing a bigger role in marketing. And technology always has, right? You've talked about, the data-driven things, the pixels, all of the math and science that I think marketing is talked about a lot through the lens of. But I think our new company called JoyFound is being able to leverage those cool parts of technology that allow us to do and create and be imaginative and creative while still reminding people of what we've kind of always been reminding people of, which is You're a human selling your humans. What is that brand? What is that story that we're putting out into the world?
This new brand agency, where do you want JoyFound to go? Where do you want to be known in the market?
I think that it would be great if we were known for, I think from a founder's perspective, a lot of founders that I know, even if they understand the importance of marketing, will say that they hate doing it. And to me, what you've created and the thing that you've built and that your team is putting all this time into should be something you love talking about and that you love getting out there. And so to me, it's just kind of reconnecting with the joy of the product and the service that you're offering and connecting with the joy of finding people and serving people who need it. So I think that would be it. It's the same way that I think I felt excited to go and like show off all those new bracelet creations that I had on a Monday morning. It's that type of feeling that you get to share your product with the world. And I think that, I don't know why, but along the way, marketing has become this conversation around data and numbers and science that take all of that natural human emotion kind of out of the equation. And so I think we're just trying to stick it back in there.
For JoyFound, is this something an already established business can come to you for, or is this only for brand new companies that need their full branding starting from zero?
No, I think it can be anyone. I think a lot of companies have managed to succeed even without things like brand and story built out. And we're not at all saying that those traditional, paid growth hacks, all of that are not going to serve people. They can. But I think, for established businesses who tend to have grown that way, I think founders can understand the feeling of if once we turn this off, it literally is all going to go away because there is no story. There is nothing memorable. You are consistently paying for the attention that you're going to get at an exact moment in time for a buyer who's exactly ready to buy for that. So there's no relationship built. So I think whether a company is new or existing, there's always time to work on building those relationships and creating something that's actually enduring and not something that literally only works when, a couple of paid things are turned on.
So you're saying that we can't just send out ebooks and get millions of dollars in sales?
I am saying that's probably not going to pan out the way you envision.
It's definitely a different world, a different age, right? There's been a lot of discussion about attention, right? The age of attention. So many things, so much content, so many different places to look, right? And how do you get people's attention? Do you think that the story of brand is something that can drive that attention, again, regardless of the channel they might be focused on?
I think so, because even the word attention, a brand knows that you need to be able to get attention. And once you get attention, you need to keep it, which often tends to, the conversation kind of ends at get. So you need to keep attention. And even once someone chooses to stick with you for a while, do they come back? So attention is so interesting because, again, it really does capture what I view as a moment in time versus when we think about friendships or relationships, we don't think about how do we just get that one moment. We think about how do we keep people around for a while. And so I think that people are starting to understand that, especially because the cost of getting attention can be really expensive in some places, and I think it can fall flat in others. So I think that as we start seeing more of, I guess, again, none of these are new concepts. It's just full funnel marketing. I think people are willing to start investing in something that's going to pay out for their brand over the long term versus just maybe a short term win.
So is storytelling, you talk about full funnel versus, demand generation versus all the different layers of things that marketing has sort of created over the years. But in my view, am I understanding this right, that brand is really the story you tell, the story that people tell about you to their friends, to their colleagues, to the committee that is buying this software, whatever it might be? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I would say that's totally right. And I think the work for companies is to figure out what that brand story is and then artfully or strategically layer in that story or unfold that story throughout all of the touch points that a customer has with your brand.
I know as a founder, as someone who's worked in relatively large companies, the marketing, the brand story is difficult a lot of times to track, right? And so figuring out what that return on investment can cause problems within your C-suite, within your team as to where the spend is going, right? Only so many dollars, unless you're Apple, to spend on whatever it might be, right? One interesting thing that I've seen this conversation kind of turn over the last year or so is that story actually feeds all the other parts of that funnel in a way that each individual click does not. Do you agree with that? Can you elaborate on that thought at all?
I would agree, and I feel like sometimes we're not talking about two completely different, universes here. When we think about clicks and when we hear a lot of terms like conversion rate optimization or getting your cost per click down or, seeing a difference in your, like all we're talking about is, did the success of something that you did work right in that moment in time? And you'll often find that the way you even improve those moments of what you're building are through a more engaging story. It's something that's more compelling. And so, I don't think that these are conflicting thoughts or ideas. I think we just forget what exactly we're optimizing for. And I think over time, people start realizing what actually works is something that felt original and human and authentic. And that's the story. So I think it's just having a conversation about that getting clear on what our story is, being consistent with that story across all of our different touch points. I honestly think a lot of marketing managers understand this concept. And I think when you work with people, maybe like founders who just don't have that type of expertise, I think they try to boil down marketing to something else like that metric or that very clear touch point. And so again, I think when you do have the right story, you're going to see a change in those numbers. I think that people are just kind of talking about it in two different ways.
Where do you think AI falls in this new universe of marketing?
I went to South by Southwest in Austin in March, and I think the conversations there were pretty spot on. And I think in those conversations, this conversation about a return to brand, this theme that we're talking about now, is being mentioned. And I think when we layer in AI, it's the ability to not, or to feel like you don't have to leave things on the table. And I think that can apply to a lot of things. It's because you created an ad and you want to reach a certain segment of customers in a different country. And now we can leverage AI to translate this and create something new with minimal, cost and minimal effort to do it. It's using AI to explore and prototype different ideas. You can figure out which ones do you like. Can you create a more like immersive strategy and brainstorming experience so what you're putting out is something that you feel really confident in? And so I really think the conversation is more. And to me, that feels really exciting.
I wonder where you think AI can play in your specific brand story, in JoyFound's coming to market. How do you think you can leverage AI to give your clients a better brand story?
I think there's a lot of ways that we can do it. When we think about brand story alone, there's multiple facets to that. I think a lot of people, when they think of brand story, they sometimes get that confused with the founder's origin story, which is like, why did you create the company, and how did you get that first customer, or, what inspires the idea? That can be a part of a brand story, but that isn't necessarily it. Things like your positioning and your ideal customers that you want to go after, your competitive analysis. There's all of this. Some are, analytics and data infused ideas that we're working with. And I think AI is able to fast track how we go through that information to start making more informed decisions about the brand that we want. So from a pure information analysis, AI, I think, is, touching parts of what we do there. But AI is also interesting because it's a great thing to bounce ideas off of, in my experience. So as we start trying to come up with some of these creative ideas, I think AI helps you get through a lot of iterations of that. So I think we're seeing some time benefits in that regard. And then I kind of mentioned this earlier, kind of this idea of a rapid prototyping. So it's, if we say that you want your brand to feel like X, Y, or Z, what does that look like before we have to create a creative brief for a copywriter or for the videographer? Can we leverage AI to see what we actually mean by that? Is everyone on the same page when we say some of those things? If we want to test out a different concept, can we use generative AI to start seeing what those ideas are? And all of those things are traditionally very time consuming and very expensive to do. And so I think those are the three most easily identified ways that I think that we can leverage AI today. And I think as AI gets better and as, we work on our own technology, I think we're going to see the execution of those deliverables be created as well. I think right now a lot of people are maybe a bit frustrated with AI because they give it a prompt and expect what they get to be publish ready, post ready, print ready. And so that still takes time. But I think that we're working to that, and I think we're going to get there closer than we think.
You sprinkled visual concepts throughout those answers. Am I to understand that JoyFound is going to be providing collateral output in the deliverable that is more visual in nature? Because I know that in some of my past experiences, you work with a marketing agency on strategy, for instance, on a brand go-to-market, whatever it might be, and you get maybe a pretty deck and then a 30-page brief, right? And it doesn't feel very connected to where you want to go, right? You kind of look at it and you're like, all right, what do I do with this? And I'm curious how you are going to attack that kind of issue that I know a lot of founding teams, frankly, a lot of companies, big and small, have.
Yeah, the now what is pretty killer after you get that from a strategy deck. And so, yes, what JoyFound really is doing is creating immersive brand and marketing strategies. And so whether that's your go-to-market or a campaign strategy for a new product launch, or, really an event, anything that, your marketing team is traditionally responsible for, our team is really able to leverage our human expertise, which we don't think is going away in this, AI conversation, and marrying that with visuals and examples of when we say your brand should look and feel like X, Y, or Z, you can actually experience what that is. So it's going beyond a flat strategy PDF and turning your brand into something that it already is, which is something that people look, feel, touch, and experience. So I think we're just trying to bridge the gap between the idea to what your customers feel and letting you get a taste of what that is way sooner, rather than waiting for production to finish.
That's really exciting. If I am a brand, a founder, a big company, whatever it might be, and I'm going to come to JoyFound, what are the kinds of things that I should have already gathered? What are the things that I should consider when I come to you and say, hey, please help, right? What are the kinds of things I should be thinking about?
I think if you are a new brand, it's interesting because I feel like these feel like two very simple questions, but questions that inevitably open up a very deep rabbit hole when we're talking with founders, which is what are you building and who is it for? And you can have versions of that, right? The who is it for? You might have a couple of versions of what those are, but clarity starts with those two questions. We can obviously, I think, again, marketing informs not only campaigns and distribution, but marketing in the sense of customer feedback and analytics can also inform product more than I think people are willing to admit. But if we just have that, I think that's a great starting point for us to then figure out, okay, how can we then really start to build a story between your product, your brand, and the people that you're trying to serve? So I think that's minimum what you need if you're a new brand. And I think if you're a brand who's trying to, reimagine what your story and strategy are, for better or for worse, you have a lot of data that we can kind of already start looking at and figuring out what parts of the story are resonating, how are they not resonating. At this point, established brands also have a lot of infrastructure that they've built out, whether it's their website or email campaigns or social presence or anything. And we're really able to hear from founders and marketing teams, what is the message we're trying to get out? And we're bringing in a fresh pair of eyes to figure out, is that actually what's translating out into all of the things that you're doing? And if not, that's kind of where our expertise in strategy and tech really kind of kick in to show you how you can more closely align the efforts that you have with the story that should be told.
Sounds like you and your team are strategic partners. You're not kind of an execution shop to do, sign up, here's your thing, Godspeed. You really want to understand the company, where they want to go, what they need to do, and spend the time human to human coming together on a real go forward. Do I understand that correctly?
I would totally agree. I think part of a strategic partnership also means lots of really interesting conversations. And I think everything that I told you, right? Like, how do we get started? It's answers to questions that we can have a good conversation around. And I think that really does separate us from some of the services that you mentioned. I think good ideas and good thinking come from that type of partnership relationship, and we have plenty of questions.
I think all good conversations, whether it's on a podcast or with a client, start and end with the idea that you are engaging together to reach something better. And if you go into it that way, you get a better result across the board. And so I've always been very interested in finding partners, whether they're vendors that I use or hires or whatever it might be, that are interested in that optimistic view, something I think is a founding principle of who you are. And so I do think this idea of brand story and strategic partner with layering in AI and technology is a really interesting use case for the market and something I don't see a lot. Another question I have for you on that is, talk to me a little bit about the pushback on cost. I see a lot of founders, especially, who get caught up in this. I can create a website for $99 on Wix. Why do I need to spend $50,000 on a website, right? Maybe that's an extreme example, but can you talk to us a little bit about, again, if I'm a founder, a startup could be doing really well and we did Wix to start, but now we want to sort of grow up a little bit. Why should I think about a more sophisticated brand story and all the collateral that goes along with that?
I mean, to that I would say, you as a business and a founder, you're spending money anyway. Whether that's every day that you're paying team members, whether that's the ad campaign that you want to put money behind, whether it's that $100 website that you might pay 5 times over for to finally get it right. You are constantly spending money. And I think part of a role of a founder is to be strategic in where that money is spent and start understanding, when do my investments start stacking on top of each other to get me where I want to go. So having worked in marketing, almost anyone that I talk to has this, horror story of that time I hired some marketing person. And I just think marketing investments, and honestly, I think this can get probably translated across many functions of an organization. It's, were you clear on what you wanted? This is where the strategic partnership part really comes in, right? Did you know where you were going? How did that collateral get built? Was the story involved? Was there you're going to spend money either way, I think, is just where I come back to. And I think strategically investing in the smart things that your business can actually get built upon are always the ones to prioritize. I think brand is a big one of those things.
I think a big part of what we're hoping to do on Do More, Be Better is give people tools, information, so they can make better decisions and go out and do things, build stuff. And I do know from experience that whether it's marketing or sales or consulting or whatever it is, right? You sort of know you might need it, but you are a little bit trepidatious about going out and getting it because of the horror stories, your friends, your own. And so feeling like there are people out there that can help is important. Are there any, educational type of offerings that JoyFound intends to bring to market, or a community of some sort to help people better understand what they're going to be doing?
Yeah, we're going to be coming up with a brand score quiz really soon that hopefully by the time the podcast is aired, we will have that linked to you as people are listening. And again, whether the intention is to really give people value from the beginning. We've talked about where our expertise as strategic partners comes in. That's how this resource is built to help you start thinking through the questions that you need to think through to build your brand and your story and unfold that throughout, all aspects of your customer journey. So I think that's a really great place to start if you want to have an idea of whether or not you're building your brand in this direction. But there's a ton of great resources out there. I think a book that I tend to gift to new founders is This Is Marketing by Seth Godin, filled with great stories and anecdotes that I think start putting a founder in the right frame of thought to think through some of those, again, more basic, simple questions, which is that, what are you building? Who is it for? What problem does it solve? And I honestly think that a founder feeling slightly unclear on some of those things is also why there's some hesitancy and fear in investing in marketing, because deep down they also don't feel quite confident in what the answers to some of those things are, which can make investing and telling someone to build something it can feel like an unwise decision at that point. So just starting to, if you're not a founder with a marketing background, just learning how to think through brand is going to help you feel better, whether you decide to do marketing internally or hire anyone to do it for you.
It's great advice. I'm a big reader, and however you consume information, I'm a big believer in learning. I think learning is the secret, not so secret unlock to pretty much everything, that a lot of people get caught up in the overwhelming of building something, is that you forget that you actually have to keep learning, keep doing. And so I'm sure our listeners will hopefully either have already read Seth Godin or pick it up. And regardless of whether you believe in Seth Godin or not, understand that learning is the key thing that you are passing along.
Yeah, one of my favorite phrases is, what you've used to get to where you are now isn't going to get you to where you want to go. And I feel like that's a friendly reminder to kind of just keep your ears out open for new things.
As a serial founder, and I'm going to call you a serial founder because you started at age 10, do you ever get imposter syndrome as you're building things?
Me and imposter syndrome have a long-term close relationship.
I've been thinking a lot about what imposter syndrome means and, whether it's good or bad. And there's been kind of a boomerang almost around this idea, where it's come back to this idea that it's something you should embrace, right? That everybody has imposter syndrome. and ignoring it does you no good service. And instead, what you should do is you should want imposter syndrome. That every year, 2 years, if you're not feeling imposter syndrome, you're not pushing yourself far enough. What do you think about that idea?
I agree with that, but I think there's one thing that whenever it's imposter syndrome or fear or feeling like I can't make a decision around something, or I'm stuck making a decision around something, I think one of the fastest lessons I've learned in business is that there's nothing quite like entrepreneurship that I think holds up a mirror to all of your strengths and all of your weaknesses, and it just shows you them in vivid detail. It's the most, I feel like if there's one thing that I would like hang my hat on, it's just that belief for me. And so anytime there's something like, even imposter syndrome is like for me becoming a little bit more of a broad term, because fear and hesitation come from so many different places, right? Are you struggling to make a decision because you're not sure what you really want? Were you never given an opportunity to make that decision? And so you're struggling with this whole like upper limit type of stuff. And so I just feel like anytime something personal is coming up, it's extremely common. And I think you could look at it as something like, oh, if you're not feeling those things, maybe you're not pushing yourself. Like there is that train of thought. But I think if anything, it's just notice what is that and figure out, why does it feel hard to make that decision? Can you pause and look at situations for what they are and figure out what is the real thing going on here? And I think that's just going to help acknowledge when those fears come up for another circumstance that's inevitably going to present itself for you. So yeah, I come back to that a lot.
As you are building companies, it can get easy to get immersed in the rabbit hole of all the things you have to do. How do you manage the time to spend with your partner, with your family, with your friends, against all the obligations of, pushing harder? You mentioned earlier this idea of hustle culture, and that it didn't necessarily mean working 80 hours a week. It was just moving forward. How do you balance all of that?
There's this phrase that always comes to mind. I think this is actually like a scripture, but it's just like, this too shall pass. And I remember hearing that as a child, and as I've gotten older, just really understood the magnitude of that idea. And so whether it's an anniversary week, right, that is for you and your partner, or your kid's birthday, or even for your business, this is like a launch week, like just giving yourself a moment to really be wherever you're trying to be. And balance is one of those words that I try to literally never use, because I just feel like the mathematical brain, there's something about that really tries to make me feel like everything has equal attention. But to me, it's more of the ebb and flow. And are you present wherever you're ebbing and flowing? I think is when I realize I'm most fulfilled, whether that means I am working in the business or doing something that's more related to my personal life. But I feel like that's even another concept that I've really tried to untangle in my head, is feeling like there's work and then there's life, and then it's all the same thing to me. Like it's your week, it's your day, it's your life, and however you decide to split that up is up to you. But I think once you start feeling like I should be doing more of this, or I should be achieving more over here, or I think that's when you kind of start taking on some disappointment or expectation that you don't need to be taking on. It's just, are you present wherever you decide to go? And I think that's the one I try to do.
When you want to be present in your personal life, what are the things that you like to do? What is a Saturday afternoon happy place for Hannah?
Saturday. So at that point, I've already turned off all of my devices. So that's key first. It was several years ago that I've completely turned off all notifications on my phone too. So unless it's like a phone call, it's really not coming through. So distraction-free is first step. But Saturday afternoon, it's absolutely coffee, pickleball, and brunch is the the routine for me on a Saturday.
Yeah, I know pickleball has been the thing that has caught fire, right? And I know you're in Austin, and you have the weather better than we have here in Chicago most of the time to have pickleball all year round. So,
I mean, summer's coming up, so we're going to die pretty soon, but it's fine. There's indoor courts. You can play anywhere, anytime.
Is that how you also, do you consider that relaxing, decompressing?
For sure. If you have never slammed a pickleball into an opponent's net, I just don't think you understand how decompressing it could really be.
Fantastic.
But other than that, I will say taking my dog to the dog park is always so nice. We've met so many people there. I feel like a dog instantly makes you a more social person. I'm sure you can relate to this too. You know everyone's dog's names, but you struggle to understand the person's name. And so it's nice. I love being outside. I love, especially right now here in Texas, the weather is just so nice. It's wildflowers and 70, 80 degrees, and it's perfect.
I so appreciate you spending the time to talk with us today. As we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests, do you have any final thoughts or a poignant message that you want to tell our audience, something that they can remember?
I feel like the theme in our conversation has just been to slow down for a second. And how I think that really does just pay dividends across everything. It's your personal time, it's your level of anxiety, it's your culture, it's slowing down to build your brand so you can speed up in the future. I don't know, I think the secret is in slowing down.
Where can people find you? What are all your socials? And you don't have to tell us the 800 that people have, but where can people find you?
It's at Hannah Marie Oliva, basically anywhere you can find it.
Okay. Thank you so much today. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.